Well, thank you everybody for joining us today for our Savannah Jewish Family Service Food for Thought program. If you have any questions during the program, please write them into chat. Today, our Executive Director, Adam Solander, will be leading the Q&As and introducing Israel's Consul General to the Southeast. Thank you for joining us, Anat and Adam.
I guess that's my cue. All right, so Anat Sultan Dagon has assumed her role as Consul General of Israel to the Southeast just under 2 years ago. She has extensive experience working with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and has had posts in Israel, obviously, Israel embassies in Cameroon, Germany, the Netherlands, and most recently from Australia. She wanted the really short version, but I think her background's pretty extensive, so I had to give you a little bit more than the short version. She holds a bachelor's degree in psychology and education and a master's in criminology, both from Hebrew University in Jerusalem, and did her military service in the intelligence division. It's important that you know that she doesn't just represent Georgia, she also represents Israel to Kentucky, Missouri, North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee, and West Virginia. She lives in Atlanta with her husband Yaron and her 3 daughters. Consul General, the floor is yours.
Thank you, and great to see you all virtually. I will just mention that the region that we cover, what you explained is true as of the situation until about 2 months ago. But we did recently have a change in jurisdiction, and our consulate in Atlanta covers 7 states, but we do not cover Missouri and West Virginia anymore. We do cover, again, Alabama and Mississippi, no problem at all. So we are covering now more of the traditional Southeast. I did arrive almost 2 years ago due to COVID affecting all of us and affecting all of our work and plans. I have not yet visited Savannah. I'm very much looking forward to doing so and looking forward to holding in-person meetings in the large region that we cover. But grateful to have the means of meeting with you all today, even if virtually.
Excellent. So I just want to remind people that if you have specific questions, if you can put it in the chat to me so we can do it, because I already have a list of questions that people have wanted me to ask. So first question is, Anat, Israel has really been like the guiding light for the COVID response. What made Israel so unique to respond so robustly to the challenge? And what did Israel do to motivate citizens to get them vaccinated?
Well, I think that Israel, like the United States and many other countries, struggled and had different phases also in dealing with the COVID challenge. I think that today we are in a much better place than we were. We are not only able to lift many of the restrictions, including masks for vaccinated people outdoors, etc., but also we are preparing for the resuming of travel to Israel, of tourism to Israel, which is, of course, of great significance to us. I think that one of the advantages that we have had in Israel is our health, medical infrastructure, which allowed access to all of our population, basically, those who are eligible over 16, and allow for an efficient vaccine operation. We are currently at a very high percentage of those over 16 who have been fully vaccinated. We do have still some in society who have chosen not to get vaccinated, but we are implementing different different means and have used different means to try and also reach those pockets where there is more or was more resistance to the vaccination through leadership that showed the example, through spiritual leaders, but also in Tel Aviv, for example. At one point, I saw a pizza being offered to those who are coming to get vaccinated, trying to really make it something that everyone is doing. And the large majority of our adult population has thankfully done so. We were also able, fortunately, to reach an agreement with Pfizer that actually allowed Israel to have sufficient doses for our population, in exchange also for medical information, because the healthcare system in Israel is all digitalized, and we are able to share that data, which in turn allows Pfizer to also learn from the vaccination operation of our population. So our entire population has been using the Pfizer vaccine. So in that, we are benefiting, but hopefully also it is assisting Pfizer as they continue, because COVID is not over. And I imagine that it will continue to accompany us for a while still.
One of the people on the screen asked, do you have knowledge if the entire Knesset is vaccinated? Or are there people making political statements there as well?
I do not have information about every specific member of Knesset, but I assume that everyone, and if not everyone, then the very large majority have been fully vaccinated, as is the case for Israelis in general.
Okay. Yesterday, they announced that Birthright Taglit is going to resume this summer, albeit it'll be with smaller groups and some different protocols than they've ever done before. Could you tell us about what the restrictions are for COVID travel to Israel now? So like if someone from here was ready to go to Israel, say in 2 weeks, could they go, and what would they have to prove and be helpful for?
Right. And so one does need to keep in mind that the guidelines change. Currently, yes, the plan is to allow for groups and delegations and tourists to visit Israel from the summer onwards. Israel is not yet open to everyone. And currently, if you wish to travel, you do need to qualify under the current criteria for traveling to Israel. And not only do you need to qualify, you need to then also receive from the consulate, after having gone through all the documentation, you need to receive written approval in order to travel. One of the criteria, for example, is having a family member, first degree in Israel. There are other criteria as well, but that is the current situation. As we progress towards the summer, there is planned an easing of these restrictions, but still, anyone who wishes currently to travel to Israel, even if they've been fully vaccinated, does need to do an antibody test upon arrival, and only once those results are presented, it's a relatively quick process. I think turnaround is around 24 hours, but only then can that person be exempt from quarantine.
And so is it fair to assume that your offices are now accepting those type of requests?
It is not only fair to assume our consulate is receiving hundreds of requests per day. And that is the situation, not just in our consulate, the situation of our missions in general. We are receiving hundreds of such requests every day, trying very, very hard to keep up and looking forward really to the easing of restrictions, which will allow for people to travel without the need to receive approval from the consulate.
What does one do to get their name pushed up the list?
Well,
so, I mean, for example, if you were to have a simcha going on in 3 weeks, or does that take priority over somebody who just wants, I don't want to say just wants to, but is going as a pure tourist?
Well, we try to treat the requests in the order that they come in, but of course, if it is a matter, sadly, there have been cases of a relative that is in very poor health condition, and there is a fear that they may not make it to see them if they don't travel quickly. We absolutely do try to prioritize such cases, and so we do try to prioritize where necessary. But one has to realize that many have been waiting to travel for a very long time. It is urgent for many, and we are trying to be as fair as possible in this process.
So one of the people on the call asked the question, do you think that they will be able to get into Israel in 3 weeks if they had already sent the letter in, the request in?
I would imagine yes, but they would have to be in touch with our consular department. But in 3 weeks' time.
So just use the number that Sunny already put on in the information.
Yes, I think she shared, and thank you for that, Sunny. I think she shared the email, which is the best way to send all the documents and everything through. And then there's a WhatsApp number, but that's for messaging only. So that email, if you go on our website, the consulate website, you will find there also a list of all of the criteria and all of the documents that you need to attach to your request. And we try to deal with the requests as quickly as we are capable.
Okay. Thank you. I'm going to read this one because this was a specific question. This week, Human Rights Watch, an international watchdog organization, released a 213-page report stating that Israel pursues a policy of ethnic supremacy that favors Israeli Jews over Israeli Palestinians, both in Israel and in the territories, branding Israel as an apartheid state. How would you respond to that when that question's queried?
I think that it is shameful for any organization to make claims and extensively supposedly back these claims by what is false information, misleading information that is detached from reality and detached of the situation in Israel. I think that we can take great pride in the democracy that we are, and in every Israeli citizen having equal rights and equal opportunities, no matter what their background is, and no matter if they are Jewish or non-Jewish, and that includes our Arab citizens who participate in elections. And as we are all seeing now, not only do they get elected, but they have a significant role also in Israeli politics. Anyone who is following Israeli politics and the current attempts at forming a coalition is well aware of the role that the Arab parties play in Israeli politics, and so it should be. Arab Israelis participate in every field in Israeli society, in every profession, including having a Supreme Court judge, fellow diplomats, but really in every segment of society. With regards to Israelis vis-a-vis the Palestinians, it is no secret, yes, there is a conflict, but that has absolutely nothing to do with apartheid and the attempts to paint a picture that is just not a reflection of our situation.
Thank you. What's the most common misconception people have about Israel?
Well, I can't say. That would depend on the person. But I will say very, very broadly and generally that often we hear criticism directed at Israel that has to do with the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And I think that too often there is an underlying assumption as if Israel is not interested in peace with the Palestinians, and that could not be farther from the truth. A resolution to our conflict is in the best interest of both sides. But in order to reach a resolution, you need both sides at the table, and you need both sides genuinely there, willing to make compromises and to reach an agreement. And sadly for the Palestinian people, their leadership is not where it should be in that regard. But I think that we have been fortunate this past year to see a change in the Middle East with the signing of the historic Abraham Accords, peace and normalization agreements between Israel and the UAE, Bahrain, Sudan, Morocco. This really reflects a change in the Middle East, in traditional perceptions, for the benefit of all of our peoples. And I hope that a similar path can be pursued also with regards to the Palestinians, but that will take a genuine interest and the right leadership and decision making on their end.
So the vast majority of Jews in the world either live in Israel or the US. How do we foster more understanding of what it takes to be Jewish in this country versus Israel? Because I think the misconceptions are so broad that they're almost two different worlds of being Jewish.
Right. Well, you mentioned earlier in this call, you mentioned Taglit, birthright. And I think that that is one of the best tools that we have in maintaining and strengthening that connection also for the younger generation, because I think that being able to visit Israel and experience Israel firsthand is something that is invaluable, incredibly important. So too, in the other direction, I think it is very important to have emissaries from Israel, such as from the Jewish Agency, in the communities here in the United States, for them to bring and present what Israel is about and connect with the Jewish communities, but also in turn, when they go back home, for them to be also ambassadors of the Jewish communities in the diaspora, sharing what that is about, because both are important. Israeli curriculum, school curriculum, now also includes teaching about the Jewish communities in the diaspora. I think that in both directions, it is very important for all of us to invest in educating the younger generation about Israel, about Jewish diaspora, and about the importance of maintaining the strength of that relationship, because they make each other stronger, and it's key for Israel, and I think for the Jewish people in general, to maintain that relationship.
Okay, thank you. One of the people on the call messaged me and said that they were very worried about the increasing aggression of terror attacks, bombs aimed at Israel, obviously the north, the south, the east, the west. I mean, it almost doesn't make a difference where. What's being done in PR on the ground to stop the violence and enhance the view of Israel on a world stage? Because historically, Israel hasn't been the most wonderful advocate of itself. The Hezbollah has been schwa, I would say. Hasn't been really strong messaging that's come out.
Well, I think very frankly, it's not just a matter of messaging. The Israeli Hezbollah being criticized, in Israel being criticized for not doing enough in that regard. I think we have changed, and I think that our Hezbollah is much different than it used to be, and we are effectively targeting relevant audiences abroad, in English, which is relevant to the United States, but also even in our region, in Arabic, in Persian. And we do have good reach, but I think we need to remember that PR, it's not just about getting messaging and facts out there. It's not always about the facts. There are those who drive false information, sure, and those who promote their agenda without being accountable or responsible or bound to the truth, bound to reality. Sometimes it will take us longer to get messaging or information out there because we actually do the fact checking, because we are responsible and accountable to the information that we send out. And that, unfortunately, is not the situation with regards to those who are trying to demonize and delegitimize the state of Israel. It is true, by the way, not just for the state of Israel, the nation state of the Jewish people. It is true, of course, of the Jewish people and of anti-Semitism. We have seen, sadly, not only a rise in anti-Semitism globally, also here in the United States, and we have even seen COVID being misused and abused in order to find another angle to promote anti-Semitism.
Thanks. Last night, there were a whole bunch of Facebook postings about your participation in a women's leadership forum. Can you share like any of the takeaways from that and the challenges of being a female leader, a woman diplomat?
Sure. So that is an initiative that we decided to work together. Being fortunate that in Atlanta we have other fellow women consuls general of a variety of different countries, and the idea was to discuss what perhaps is unique to each of us, but also what brings us together and what is common to women career diplomats, women in international relations, and what in many ways is common globally when we look at gender equality, and not just at our respective home countries. For me, in that regard, I think that Israel has much to be proud of, but also still a long way to go. And I think that there is importance in having these conversations, and there is importance in bringing to light what we have achieved, but what is yet to be achieved, because that is part of the process.
Right. For those of you who don't know, Anat's father, David Sultan, was a significant Israeli diplomat who was, amongst other things, the ambassador to Egypt and I think to Turkey as well.
And to Canada.
And to Canada, sorry, I didn't want to shortchange him. What did you learn from him that you've used in your postings? And would you try to influence your daughters to follow in your and his footsteps?
So I learned from him the love for our country, for the country which we represent with pride. I learned from him, I think, many of the advantages of this very unique career, of learning a new country, a new culture, a new language, being open to listening, and then identifying the best ways to promote our relations and to promote the state of Israel wherever it is that we are. My father was, as you mentioned, he had a long career in the Israeli Foreign Service, and one of his positions was Israel's ambassador to Egypt, which was of special significance because he, with his family, had left Egypt and emigrated to the state of Israel once that was possible. Because, like many Jews in Egypt and elsewhere, they understood that they are not welcome, that they are not home, and they came home to Israel. And I think that is the Israel that I grew up on, knowing not only to be proud of what we are, but also to appreciate that we have in Israel. And that is something that I continue to appreciate and continue to acknowledge. It is not something that we can ever take for granted. I am very happy to have chosen this career. I cannot think of really any career that can come close to the level of interest that I have, and the privilege, really, of being able to represent my country in so many fascinating places, and forging alliances in so many places. With regards to my daughters, I can't really say. I think like any parent, I want them to be happy. And if that means for them diplomacy, and if that means for them something completely different, I'm fine. I'm fine with whatever it is that they choose, as long as what they do makes them happy. And I'm fortunate that what I do makes me incredibly happy.
Oh, nice answer. So I read in your biography, which I know I'm not supposed to share the whole thing, that when you were at university, you worked as a sideline with disabled veterans.
Mm-hmm.
What did you learn from that early experience, and how did that prepare you to have a child who has unique challenges?
Right. So, as a student, I worked for several years with disabled IDF veterans, with trying to assist in rehabilitation and getting back into a work, whatever that work may be. And I even accompanied a veteran who was very significantly impaired, and was there until the moment she passed away.
Wow.
It's part of our reality. It's part of what Israel is, and it is part of the price that we pay in order to have a state of Israel. And I think that our disabled veterans not only serve as a reminder of that, but also with regards to disabilities and special needs, I think that they play an important role as well in raising awareness in our society to special needs, what that involves. Many years later, my youngest daughter, I have three beautiful girls. My youngest, Neve, is 10 years old. She was born with multiple disabilities, with a very rare genetic disorder. And I think that overall, it's a challenge anywhere, no matter where you are. It's a challenge for the parents, even if they are in the most advanced of places. But I think in Israel, there is a very healthy approach, I would say, towards special needs and disabilities, and one that helps in practically being able to address what needs to be addressed, and address it within society, so not something that is removed or distanced. We, like any other society, still have a way to go in that regard as well, but I think that overall we also have a lot to be proud of, and part of it is likely due to our very unique circumstances in Israel.
Well, my follow-up question was, is Israel's attitude different, and what could we learn? But I guess that's a rhetorical question now, since you already answered it. What's the single thing that the 12 people on this call could do from Savannah, Georgia, to be supportive of Israel?
I think it is really just about more of what you're already doing. The fact that you are here means that you are engaged, means that you care. It's about having as many conversations as you can about Israel. Because I think the thing really about explaining Israel, we mentioned the word hasbara, it's not really about a specific message, that you need to receive from somewhere, that you need to know. You all know it. each from your own perspective. You all have your personal acquaintance, your personal stories of what Israel is about. And I think there is great importance in all of those voices being heard in your circles, in whoever you can reach, in teaching your children, your grandchildren about what Israel is, about Israel's importance and Israel's significance to the Jewish community. For those of you who know a world in which there was no state for the Jewish people, or who knew a world where that young Jewish state had to fight for its survival, those are stories that are important to share because they are relevant today. They are relevant to understanding why is it that Israel is so adamant about the danger of Iran and the nuclear threat. It is key to understand that this is not about differences or political opinions. This is about the state of Israel. No matter where you are on the political map in Israel, it's about the state of Israel knowing that the Iranian regime poses an existential threat to the state of Israel. And all of you knowing the background and the history, I think can be very beneficial in providing the context. Yeah.
I've got two more questions for you because I know that 45 minutes was our limit. And I'm going to have to read this one because I'm not quite sure I understand it. So I know you're much smarter than me, so you'll understand it. It says, recently at JNF program, they spoke about anti-Semitism may be best countered by encouraging philo-Semitism, a love and understanding of Jews and culture among the up to 25% of Latin people who may have Jewish ancestry, not to proselytize, but to engage them from outside of Israel in Israel's future through a new birthright program or something like that. Are there ways and programs that Israel's trying to turn the tide of anti-Semitism from the inside out with the idea of philo-Semitic education? You understand that?
I think that in general, combating anti-Semitism is something that needs to be ongoing on many fronts. And yes, we work with Christian organizations. We bring delegations to Israel. There is a wonderful organization called the Philos Project, which does just that, with whom, of course, the state of Israel works in educating here in the United States, but also bringing delegations to Israel, to our region. But I think it really is the fight against anti-Semitism needs to be tackled on all fronts, and we need to remain constantly vigilant. It is something that our consulate, like other Israeli missions, is heavily involved in. It is something that I raise in almost every conversation that I have with an elected official. We are one example of what we are trying to promote here in the Southeast US is the adoption of the IRA, the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance working definition of anti-Semitism, which has been accepted by the United States as a member country, and the Department of State and Education both work with this definition. We would like to see it adopted on a state level as well. And we are working to promote that, not just the Israeli consulate, but I've put together a group of fellow consuls general based in Atlanta, whose countries have also adopted the working definition. And we are making that ask together because I think that in combating anti-Semitism, it can't be just the Jewish community or Israeli representatives. It has to be the responsibility of the international community as well. And so that is one of the things that we are trying to promote. But it really is an issue of great concern to us because anti-Semitic incidents are ongoing and are. I did not anticipate about 2 years ago, before I arrived here, how much of a regular, ongoing issue it is. And I'm sad to say that it is, and it is something that we are dealing with regularly.
Okay, I'm going to give you one final softball. Typically, postings are no more than 4 years. Is that correct?
Right. So the normal diplomatic, the average diplomatic posting when you go on posting is 4 years. And then usually there's a possibility to extend by a year or two, depending on circumstances.
So you're going to be here for another 2, 3, or 4 years. And then you'll probably go back to Israel to re-Israelize yourself and re-study and get back into it. What are you going to tell Israelis about Southern Jews?
Only the truth. I think that Southern hospitality is definitely something that is shared by the Jewish communities here as well. And very frankly, we are incredibly fortunate and privileged to have such strong, supportive, active, and engaged Jewish communities here in the Southeast. It is something that I appreciate greatly, and I think that it is not only of great importance in that relationship that we discussed between Israel and Jewish diaspora, but it plays also a very important role in the strength of the Israel-United States relationship.
I really appreciate that. What can we do for you? Just keep doing what we're doing?
Just indeed, and continue the engagement, and perhaps organize an encounter with the younger generation. I would love to do that as well.
Okay, well, I think Sonny can take care of that.
Well, thank you, Adam, for leading a conversation today. And thank you, Anat, for joining us. It's been an honor. I would like to invite everybody to join us next week, like every Thursday, at the same link for another Food for Thought program. We'll be having Linda Sachs talking about Eshet Chayil. So I hope to see everybody there. Thank you.
Thank you so much. All the best to you all.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Jackie, for making it happen. Bye.